On this recording. Hi everyone, welcome to Tarot and Shadow, Shadow and Tarot. As Sarita's here, she's looking gorgeous. And
Hello.
as we sort of enter this space, we're gonna let people wander in. It is Mercury retrograde. I was already late to a call today. So we're just gonna give some grace, and I'm happy that you're here. This is our last class in a set of series on the tarot. Best for last? I don't know. I'm just going to say it. Maybe best for last. I'm going to go there.
Honored.
And I'm so excited about it. But before we dive into the juicy content, I want to make sure that everyone knows how this place works. If this is your first time joining a holisticism class, hello, welcome. So happy that you're here. I'm Michelle. I'm the head witch in charge here. And head bitch in charge as well. So if you have any complaints or feedback, please feel free to ping it to me. I've got your back. And I'm stoked that you're here. We are doing these amazing, incredible workshops with awesome practitioners in our community. Every month we're focusing on a new modality. This month was tarot. Next month we'll be talking about herbalism, so keep your eyes peeled for those classes that are going to go up. And our intention is to make well-being as accessible and as inclusive as possible, and also holistic, because all this stuff doesn't exist in a vacuum, in a love and light vacuum. It's applied to our life and to our world. And we heal in community, which is why we do these communal classes. So obviously we're on Zoom. Hello, COVID-19, she's still here. So let's get situated in this virtual space. You could click on the chat and have that pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, that would be excellent. And if you could type in your name, your pronouns, and where you're tuning in from, I would love that, just to sort of invite yourself into the space and let everyone know that you're here. I'll feel free to start. I'm Michelle. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm in LA. Jade, she, her in Seattle, amazing. And as you all sort of enter and tell us where you're tuning in, where you're tuning in from, and if you want to tell us what you're tuning in for, maybe you're most curious to talk about in this session, that would be helpful too. You can go ahead and change your pronouns in your name as it shows up on Zoom. Easy way to do that is find your name on the participants tab, click, hover over it, click on the more button, and then click on rename. And you can just rename yourself and add your pronouns there. This helps us not misgender you, which would absolutely suck on accident. And it also just makes the space a little bit more inclusive and accessible to anyone who joins. Cool. Madeline says, love Sarita. We love that. Madeline didn't even introduce themselves. Oh, there she did. Yeah, she did. Okay. But I like the priorities. Awesome.
Thank you.
Alyssa in Bainbridge, Ireland, Cassie in Portland, Aaliyah in Pittsburgh, Brooke in Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Jean from Brooklyn, Ashlyn from Las Vegas. Hi, Ashlyn. Allison in Brooklyn. Hey, Allison. Okay, cool. We got quite a crew here. And I've said this if you've joined any of our other classes, but I'm recording this right now. So if at any point you need to like dip out of here and go do something, maybe enjoy the sunshine if you have it, or go take a nap, or go tend to yourself or to someone else in your family, please feel free to do that. I'm going to send you the recording of this in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'll also add captions. So if you are hearing impaired, the captions are coming. Just know that that's coming. So just giving you a heads up there. I also want to invite you to take care of yourself. If that means that you turn off your video, if that means that you just close your eyes and you listen. We've been on a lot of screens over the last couple months. Particularly, I would say over the last month, there's been a lot of screen time. So if you just need a little bit of space to be here and take in whatever we have to offer, feel free to do that. This is your time. And again, we're recording it, so you can always go back and look at it when you feel like you have more spaciousness or you're a little bit more available. And you can pop your questions into the chat. I'll be auditing it as Sarita teaches and bestows her wisdom upon us. And you can also feel free to independently or sort of individually message me. And if you have a question you want to keep anonymous, and I'll keep you anonymous as I ask the question for you. So I think that's pretty much it. And with that, I'm just so excited to welcome Sarita. Sarita, please welcome.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me. I have had so much fun doing these. Like, I spend so much time on Zoom for work, and this is making me like Zoom again. So it's very exciting. Thank you. Like Michelle said, we're going to be doing, we're talking about shadow work and how the tarot can support us with that. We don't worry, I'm going to start sort of from a place of if you've never heard of any of this before. So if you have, I hope that this can be a nice refresher. And if you haven't, hopefully this will get us all on equal footing. And as always, you can put stuff in the chat. I know sometimes I can get going, so do not feel like you are interrupting or anything. If you need something re-explained, I bet someone else does too. So please feel free to just ping us in the box. Quick little bit about me, how I got here. I am a tarot reader. I've been reading tarot for a few years now, like 3 years or so. And I really got into tarot work, and I started by reading for myself, like most people do. But I was on this like very deep, like personal journey, and like in therapy and going to group sessions and individual session and like going to yoga and just like doing all the things that everyone's like, okay, and this is how you take care of yourself. But what I really struggled with was like having space to process all of that. Like that's so much information that's coming into you, like just like all the time. And so I wanted something that I could like sit down with and really just kind of like enjoy and sort of be able to process in the moment, like at my own pace, my own speed. Writing comes very natural to me. So like I was journaling for a while, but even that, like I kind of struggled with because it's like, I'm writing, and then it's like, I have to go back and actually read what I wrote. But the great thing about tarot is I was able to like pull a couple cards, and then just kind of like fully immerse myself in like, what does it mean? How do I feel like this applies to me? And like really like kind of talk myself through it, which was really how I learned how to read. I think, yeah, I have it. My first deck, which I love, and I think I mentioned in my other Tarot 101, it's called the Black Power Tarot deck. It's all figures from like Black pop culture. Like the lovers is James Brown, Etta James, and Nina Simone, which I think is very funny. The Fool, that's Richard Pryor. Like, so I found a deck that I was like really into and excited about. So that also really helped with like, okay, I want to spend time with this. I still use this deck sometimes. Right now, I am most using the Modern Witch deck, which is what I'll be using today. It's a really great, like bright, fun, super inclusive, like different bodies, different shapes, colors, gender, like all, like it is very much like this is what humans are like, instead of maybe the traditional Rider-Waite. I don't really work with that deck. Not that there's, I mean, if it's your deck, it's your deck, and I fully support you in that. It didn't super resonate with me. So rather than try to force myself to like something, I didn't. No surprise there. Yeah, I think that's a little bit about me. And then, yeah, we'll be getting into some shadow work and how the tarot can support us through that. Cool. Any questions or anything before I start just getting into all of this? Shadow work is wild, I know.
Okay. Feel free to unmute yourselves and just pop in with a question if you have one.
Yeah. Don't, like, there are no like, oh, well, like I have to raise my hand and wait to be called on. Like, nah, you're good. I hear myself talk all the time, so please. So yeah, like I said, I around the same time that I started reading tarot was really getting into shadow work, because I was doing a lot of self-reflection and self-discovery. It was maybe the first time in my life that I really focused on me in a non-critical, non-judgmental way, really just exploring, like, what do I like? What don't I like? What makes sense to me? What doesn't make sense? again, that idea of this theme that will keep coming up today is learning and unlearning. So, and like with that, I mean, there's a limitless amount of stuff that we don't know, right? Like that's just the nature of the world. And so there's so many things for us to learn, but also, and I think this is something that's becoming very apparent in our society right now, with COVID shining a big bright light on all of the inequities, with people, I think, really hitting a breaking point when it comes to police brutality and the way Black folks and minorities are treated in this country. There's unlearning, right? We are naturally or automatically taught some things based on our family, our culture, our society, whatever. And some of that's really problematic, right? Like some of it's really great and it's like our core and who we are. And some of it, whether we like it or not, has gotten into our core and is part of our foundation, but maybe doesn't actually align with who we are now. Maybe doesn't align with the better good, with the good for others, or maybe it's just fucked up shit that we're just now realizing is fucked up, right? Like that's the other thing. And so we are in this collective unlearning, but that's such a big task. Like, how do I teach society to be better? Like, like that's a really, really big task. But if we can do internal work on ourselves and be sort of leaders by example for the people in our lives, then we can start to affect change in our little nooks of the world. And eventually that spreads, right? Like if I impact the 5 people in my circle and then they, and whatever they take from me, take what you like, leave the rest, make their own self-work and then impact another 5 people, right? Like we're growing. And eventually as a collective, that's how we really make change. I mean, it's, if you are like some super amazing world leader or like whatever, like that's great. And I am so impressed and proud of your work and thank you. But I also understand that can feel really, really intimidating. And I think we are very much in this time of, I want to change, I want to make change, but how? Like, I don't know how. It feels scary. It feels too much. I feel too much, all of these things, right? And so that was what led me to today's workshop on shadow work. And so I wanted to read a quote from this book that I really like. It's called Gold Mining the Shadow by Pixie Lighthorse. You can get it at most bookstores. Encourage you to find a Black-owned bookstore. So she describes the shadow, so our shadow self, as doing shadow work as making us accountable to our blind spots. And we are looking at old narratives and seeking ways to transform them. So this idea of there is a whole other world happening in our subconscious and our unconscious that is interacting with everything that our conscious is interacting with. But because we're not fully aware of it, those are our blind spots, right? Like those are the areas that we're not actively engaging, actively connected to. And so what happens when, if you're driving, you've got a blind spot, you don't know it's there, that's how you get in an accident, right? When we are living in the world and we've got these blind spots that we are unaware of, and maybe right now are kind of learning about for the first time, you might realize that you've been getting into a lot of accidents. Like damage has been done, or there's been, you're being triggered in ways that you didn't even realize. And it's this idea that, we don't have to live like that. Like, turns out, like, you don't have to live constantly being like, well, hopefully today will be okay. Like, and doing shadow work can really help us to figure out what those blind spots are and figure out what are the parts of ourselves that we consciously, unconsciously are hiding from others, the parts that are lying underneath the surface, the version of ourselves that we present, as well as how do we learn to love those parts of ourselves? Because ultimately our shadow comes from a place of neglect. a place of not having love, not getting needs met. And I mean that in every way possible. You know, there's like, we talk about little t trauma and big T trauma. Like little t is like the stuff that we are all interacting with, whether it's racism, sexism, just like shitty neighbors, like like just like life things that like aren't easy to deal with, or just have some type of less than positive impact. And then, you know, we've got our big T traumas. That's abuse, that's assault, that's what we, I think, typically think of when it comes to trauma. But even if you've never experienced big T trauma, we are all experiencing little t trauma to some capacity. We are all, to some capacity, victims and perpetrators when it comes to little t trauma. And I think that can be really, really scary and really hard for people to accept. You know, nothing feels good about being a victim, and nothing feels good about being a perpetrator. Like, I like to think that if you're on this call, you probably are someone that doesn't want to be a perpetrator. And so it can be really, really hard to accept that you have played that role in someone's life, maybe even just in your own life. Like self-sabotage, like we can be our own perpetrator. And so when we get into shadow work, when we get into exploring these deep, dark corners, I like to call them the sticky bits. Like, when you're just like kind of in your life thinking about something, the parts of yourself that maybe flare up and you work really quick to make them go away. Like those are the places that stick. And that's where, you know, the work needs to be done. Like that's where we need some exploration. And I want to say, like caveat in that, when we are dealing with big T trauma and even little t trauma that has just built up over time, that can do real serious hurt, and that can do real serious damage. And there is nothing wrong with admitting that, and there's nothing wrong with getting help. I love my therapist. I see her every Friday, and it's lovely. I have been in therapy on and off since 2012. I also take an antidepressant and ADHD medicine because that's what works for me, right? It's such a personal journey, and I encourage folks to explore and figure out what works for you. And remember, what works for one will not work for all, and that's okay. Like, I think when we're doing spirit work and we're doing self-development, it's like, well, that person did it and it looked really easy. And, you know, I always want to be like, that's because you're not seeing the sticky part behind closed doors. But also, maybe they just got lucky and they found the thing that worked for them quickly. Others, it might take us a while. Like, I started therapy in 2012 and I didn't get like an appropriate and useful diagnosis until almost 2014. So like, and it was over those 2 years that I maybe was in like my deepest, darkest holes because I wasn't getting the help that I needed, because I also didn't know how to express it, and I didn't have someone that could help me figure out how to say the words. And so with that, I'm just saying, I want to encourage folks to figure out what works for you, be open to a process, know that it's not easy and it's very brave of you to be doing it, and know that what someone's journey looks like probably will look nothing like yours, and that's fine. So that's my pitch for therapy.
Can I jump in too?
Yes, please.
Also, what works for you today may not work for you in a year. Like, and just know that this is a toolkit. This isn't like the hammer that you use for everything. It's like you get to pick and choose what works for you at the time that it works for you. And that might be tarot for like 90 days this year, and you pull for tarot every day for 3 months straight. And then you're like, I never want to look at tarot again. And then you pick it up in another year. So it's a process.
Yes, I love that. And, you know, we're adaptable, right? Like humans, like we don't do the same thing for forever. And if we did, we'd be very stunted. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was a cute kid, but if I'm still acting the way that I was as a kid, like I've got some real work to do. So yeah, definitely being open to ebbs and flows. Like even as someone who reads, like there will be stretches where I'm like, I just don't really feel like picking up my deck. Like that's work that I don't feel like doing, I don't have space for, I just don't want to, like whatever it is. And then there are other times where it's like, I can't stop pulling cards. Like I need to pull a card for everything. Um, so yeah, ebbs and flows. So yeah, so thinking about shadow work, it is how we learn to love the sticky bits. It is how we learn to make peace with all that we are. Every single person has a shadow. You can have a perfectly perfect life and you will still have a shadow because you are a human. That's how that works. If there was a way to create humans that were perfectly evolved and ascended, they wouldn't be a human, they'd be ascended. So that's how that works. So with that, I mean, you're not in this alone, right? Like we are all figuring out our shadows, and now is such a beautiful time to be doing that because we have to stay at home to some capacity, right? We are having to spend a lot of time with ourselves because even if you are maybe an essential worker, like when you come home, it's still just you and the fam, like whatever. And we as a collective are in this moment of really questioning some like foundational pieces of who we are and how we got here. So, you know, use that energy to your advantage, right? Like use that to work for you, use that collective, like unearthing, learning and unlearning to be part of your journey. So when we think about, the other thing is I feel like often when I talk about shadow work, people are like, oh, that's so scary. I want nothing to do with it. And I'm like, I get it. Being confronted with yourself can be really fucking awful. Like, right? Like we work to hide things for a reason. And to have to face that, I think I said this in the live, to have to look yourself in the mirror and like fully see yourself and take yourself in is really, really hard sometimes. And that can, again, that's another thing that can change from day to day to day. An exercise that I really encourage folks to do at some point after this, or if you want to turn your camera off and do it, I'll never know. But is set a timer on your phone, on whatever, for 1 minute and just look at yourself in the mirror for 1 minute. I mean, blink, but like just look at yourself, take yourself in, take in your own gaze. And then whatever your processing is, if it's writing, if it's talking, if it's whatever, but process after and really think through like moment to moment, I feel like what is coming up? What does it mean to like fully see yourself without all of the smoke and mirrors that we put up to get through life, right? Like some of this is like necessary to function in the world. Like I unfortunately can't just go through life demanding everything and like setting things on fire when I don't get my way, literally and figuratively. As good as that might feel, like I'm not going to get too far. So, you know, there's some adapting that happens when we're out in the world, but to take time to fully see yourself and then to fully process what that means and what came up is I think a revolutionary act, and is a really great place to start with shadow work, to see like what, you know, like sometimes there are some days where it's like I look in the mirror and it's like all I can do is pick, is like, oh, like my face is doing this and that thing and that thing and that thing, and then it spirals into the whole day. Now I've got a day where I feel like shit and I'm second guessing everything that I do. And then there are other days where I can look in the mirror and be like, what a winner. Like, and then let that energy carry me through the day. And so I think it's so important to have those check-ins, because what I know is part of my shadow work is I am my harshest critic. Like no one can ever tell me a negative thing about myself because I've already said it to myself. Like no one can critique my work because I've already ripped it to shreds, regardless of whether that needed to happen or not. And so like, I know that if I am in one of those places where it's like nothing feels good, nothing is good, everything I do sucks, and I'm terrible and should probably just go into a dark hole and never see someone again. Like, like when I know and that's coming up, like that's my shadow saying something's wrong, something is off. There's, again, this is just this misbelief that our shadow is negative, when really our shadow is there to support us in the unconscious, to support us in, hey, you're not paying attention to this part of yourself that is just getting triggered all the time. That like you're not noticing, like thinking of me personally, it's like, hey, you're not noticing that like you're really stressed and overwhelmed at work and not feeling supported. And so you've taken it on to be your fault, because that's those old habits that are still there, right? And then when I am like, and then I just sat in the mirror and I was like, what if I just had a different face? Like, you know, like, and then it's like, okay, so now I know that that voice is coming up. So that must mean that there's some external there's something going on that is making me feel unheard. Like that's ultimately what that was, is I don't feel heard. I don't feel like my needs are getting met. And so now I can spend time with myself, with my tarot, and kind of explore like, well, what's coming up? What's going on? What are we missing? And start to find some of those answers so that then I find a lighter path forward. So now I'm not stuck in the deep, dark crevasse of, of life sometimes. And it's a little bit of being able to pull myself up and out. And again, I want to be clear, like, this is a skill, this is a muscle. It's not going to be easy. Even as someone that practices it, it's not easy all the time. And, you know, don't feel like, honestly, if you're doing this and you're like, fuck, I just don't get it, I'll never figure this out, like that's something to explore. Like that's a little bit of the shadow talking of like, all right, well, we didn't figure this out. So what does it mean for us when we can't figure something out? Like, what about that sends us to this place of doubting worth or doubting ability, like whatever the shadow may be. And so I think, and the way that tarot really comes into this is tarot is all about reflection and interpretation, right? So I think there's a common misconception that the tarot can tell you the future. Not really. Like it can give you, I mean, if you, depending on your reader, they might be seeing something and like that comes up when they read, but like the cards at their core give you information. Like even if I am like, okay, like, will I get this job? I'll pull one card for yes, one card for no. And it's not saying yes or no, it's saying if I got this job, this is what that would look like. And if I didn't get this job, that's what that would look like. And so now it's up to me to take that information in and adjust accordingly. So if it's saying, if I get this job, I'm going to make all this money and my life's going to be perfect and da, 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 cool. Then that means I got to show the fuck up for that interview. That means like, I got to follow through when they want samples of my work. Like I still have to do my part. It's not just like, oh, tarot said I'm getting the job, so done. Like, like that's information. And if it's like the no is actually the like better of the two options, then it's like, okay, so maybe like I've already agreed to come in for an interview. So like, you know, and I'll take it, but like, I'm not really going to pour my heart and soul into this because ultimately like, doesn't really feel like this is for me. And maybe coming in with that mindset allows me to hear something in the interview that I maybe wouldn't have heard if I had gone in just being like, OMG, like this has to be the job for me. This is the one because I've decided. The number of dream jobs I've had and quit is like a whole other, like it's like, oh, it turns out this isn't my dream. Funny story about that. I just thought that it was. But yeah, and so the tarot can help give us information. Let me do a quick time check. Cool. So the tarot can give us information on how to properly assess the shadow, what to do with it, what there is to learn and unlearn, the purpose that it's serving. I think it's really important to validate shadow and validate maladaptive behaviors. And like when I say that, I mean stuff that, you know, it gets you through, like you got to the other side, but it might not be the best thing for you. And so the reason why I think it's important to validate them, because they serve a purpose. Because at some point in time, that was a necessary coping skill, and it was necessary for you to need to process that way, to think that way, to do that thing, like whatever it is, in order to survive. Like our brains and our psyches ultimately just want us to survive. Like that lizard brain is always running, and it's like, look, at any point in time, we might have to fight, flee, or freeze. And I need to be prepared for that. And like, you know, coping skills can fall into one of those buckets. They might not be literal. But also those coping skills don't serve us in every situation. But if we have learned through little t or big T trauma that this is the way we cope, this is the way we deal, this is the way we get by, then why wouldn't you keep doing it? Like, right? Like of course you've developed a habit. Like, of course that's the way that you're doing it. But exploring the shadow, exploring ourselves allows us to ask, does this still serve me? Is this still of value? Is this still for my greatest good? And, you know, to Michelle's point earlier, like she was saying, like what serves you now might not serve you later. And then it might serve you again, even later. Like, you're allowed to be a person and based on what you need, get those needs met. So it might be tarot right now, it might be Reiki later, it might be Akashic Records, you might come back to tarot, it might be fuck all this mysticism, I'm gonna go do something, like I don't know. But you're allowed to explore those things and figure out what is not serving me and how can I move forward with that? Like, how can I find a way to get to a place that I am getting my needs met? We're at about halfway, so I want to take a second and see if there are any questions from anyone. Questions, comments, concerns, something not making sense.
Are we, I feel like a big question that comes up when we start talking about shadow work is like, how do I find my shadow? Are we going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Is that the segue into the next section of class?
We did not plan this.
We really didn't.
We are.
But we are both psychics, so
here we are. Magic. It's real. Yes. So there are a variety of ways to find your shadow. I think what is maybe the easiest path, because this is who we are as a society, to finding your shadow, is thinking about the parts of yourself personality-wise, right? Or like processing-wise that you don't really like, for better or for worse. Like what are the, like, I know as a fire sign, as someone with a ton of fire in my chart, I can be really quick to anger. And just like, it's not even real anger. I'm not actually mad. I'm just like slightly irritated, but it's very big because that's the way I'm a Leo sun and moon. So like, that's my world. And so like, so my shadow is anger, because also the other side of that coin is I don't know how to validate real anger when it's my own, because I'm like, oh, no, you're doing that thing where you're too big. So like, let's squash this down. Like I, through my life, was not able to decipher what's real and what's not real when it comes to anger. So my shadow work is really around like, is this real? Are you mad or are you just a little annoyed? And if you are mad, please validate that. And if you're just a little annoyed, go take a walk, go read a book, like use one of those coping skills you've learned to like deal with that. So I think that's maybe like the easiest way that folks approach it is like, you know, what are the personality traits that like I work to hide, or that I don't necessarily love, or I feel guilty about. Guilt is really good at helping us find our shadow. Because we are often, especially if you are a femme, we are often guilty about some weird ass shit that like again, learning and unlearning. So guilt can really help to point to where's my shadow living. Because even like, if you take something that I think comes up often in our society, unfortunately, is like food and this idea of like body, right? And so even if you were like, well, I don't like the way that I look, or I don't like the fact that I eat the whole thing of ice cream, which can't relate because I love eating ice cream, but like, whatever, we're all different. Then like, what is it about that thing that like, what is it about eating a whole thing of ice cream that you don't like? Why does that make you feel guilty? Is it because that it makes you feel like you're doing too much? And is it because maybe someone in your life has repeatedly told you you're doing too much, even when you weren't? And so you just keep pulling at that thread, and eventually you get to this place of, oh, here's a fucked up core belief that I have just made as part of who I am. And now I have a choice to keep it up or make a change, right? Like life is all about choices. And so when we think about the tarot coming into this, it's like, okay, if I've gotten down to, oh, I believe that I'm too much. That's what the core belief is. So I can go to my cards and we'll do a spread at the end, but a spread I like to do for shadow work is as above, so below. What is there to learn? What is there to unlearn? So it's 4 cards. And we'll do it. I'll do one with y'all. But it's asking, as above, what am I presenting? How does that show itself up in my life? And like in this example, it's like, well, thinking I'm too much shows up as I don't deserve to eat a pint of ice cream, even though that's the thing that I want. So below, it's I feel that I am too much. That's that internal shadowy world that's happening. And then what is there to learn, right? That's the above, that's what's presenting. I need to learn to allow myself to take up space. What is there to unlearn? That my desires are not valid, right? So we've gone through all 4. I would have perfectly found cards that went with every single one of those things, and I'd be like, wow, magic is real. But like, so you like, I think that's maybe the easiest point of entry for people with shadow. On the other end, if you, this book that I mentioned, Gold Mining the Shadow, it's a workbook, and she guides you through, Pixie Lighthorse, which is such a cool name. She guides you through some sort of leading questions into, but coming from the same entry place of what are your habits? What are your default settings? So when I don't have time to think, when I don't have time to like make a conscious decision, that's when my habits kick in, right? Like that's when those grooves that we know, that's where we go into. And then you have to think about, well, does this actually serve me? I think we got into this a little bit on the IG Live of like I love feeling like I accomplished something despite all the odds. And it's like, why? Like, and part of that is because it was necessary for survival, right? Like that's what we were talking about. But then I got used to that feeling of achievement and all the things that came. I like what comes with achievement, right? Like I like when people tell me I do a good job. I like when people tell me they like something. Like yes, please, a Leo loves compliments. And so now though, when I'm not paying attention, I create situations where I have to overcome. And it's like, you could have just walked straight through, but you decided to like take this weird winding path. Like why? It's like, oh, because actually like I'm not feeling supported in some capacity. And so I did the default thing to make people support me and make people pay attention to me. So that can be another way to explore shadow. If you're in therapy, your therapist probably knows something about shadow. It originally started, I shouldn't say originally, it came into like common knowledge through Carl Jung. He says there's gold to be found in the darkness, I think is the quote. But it's this idea of even in the icky, sticky bits, there's knowledge there, there's information there, there's learning there. And it just helps us get closer to our evolved self, as Jung likes to talk about.
Rita,
So yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, but
No, no.
there's a really good question in the
Ooh,
chat that
yeah.
I feel like maybe a great segue, and huge stance of Carl Jung over here. Young, as I like to call him. One of my favorites. Miranda says, I'm wondering if we're going to touch on interacting with the shadow of others. I've been steeped in shadow work for some time now, so I feel it come up. When I feel it come up, I question where it's coming from and aiming to integrate. But sometimes I'm just wondering how to decipher between what's mine and what's somebody else's shadow. Sometimes I inflict self-harm by always resorting to conflicts by being my own shadow coming up, which is totally shadow of like 100% ownership on me. I'm the bad one in this situation.
It's me. Yeah. Totally. Oh my God, that's a great question, and a perfect segue. So I like to think about like my shadow gets triggered by different things in the world depending on what my shadow is. Now and that's if I just got to go through the world never interacting with another human, which COVID kind of. But the minute we bring other people in play, we are now in conversation with them and their shadow. So if we think about people who have maybe been in our lives that you're just like, something about them, I'm always angry. Something about them, I always feel depleted. Like there's like being around this person feels like work. Like that's the shadow interacting. Like it might be something about them is triggering you, do some self-exploration, but also they maybe don't have their shadow in check. And so they're responding to you as being really possessive, for instance, because they have this shadow work around not feeling loved, not feeling needed. So they overcorrect by being like, and I'll just make you mine. Like, and so now these two, and you've got a shadow of wanting to do the impossible, wanting to fix these impossible, God, the number of men I thought I could fix, like Jesus Christ. And so now our shadows are talking to each other. They want to possess, I want to fix. And that's a terrible combination because I'm gonna stick around because I think that I can fix you. And all you want is for me to stick around. So you're gonna think that this possessive trait is good, is helpful, is serving you. And so now there's this whole subconscious conversation that's going on that no one's fucking aware of. You're like, I don't know, we just kind of fight sometimes, but at the end of the day, we just really love each other. It's like, who? Who are you fooling? Not even yourself believes that. So like being mindful, like of when you're around someone and you're not able to be your best self, when you're not able to self-correct, right? Like we're not perfect. We're not our best selves all the fucking time, no matter who we're around. But like, if you're doing this work, then you're probably at least somewhat aware of like, oh, that's a thing like that I'm being cognizant of, being mindful of. But like when you get around that person, all that falls away. It's like, there's some shadow here for both of us. And I saw come up in the chat, like, how do we read someone's shadow? How do we as tarot readers, as intuitives, like, how do we know that? From the intuitive side, it's a lot of when you just get that gut feeling of like, I just don't like them. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain it. I catch myself, I'll be like, I don't know, they're like a perfectly lovely person, but like not really for me. And it's like, you don't mean that. Like, I'm just trying to be nice. It's like I don't mean that. I don't like them. And that's fine. I don't have to. Like, I'm not gonna be a dick about it. But like something in me, like that internal voice, that gut feeling, that tingly feel, like whatever it is for you, it's just like, I don't like them. I don't like being around them. I don't trust them. I don't feel safe around them. Like I don't think I mentioned this, like shadow work is so deeply connected to our root chakra if you prescribe to the chakra system. So our root is physically at our tailbone, and emotionally is all about being grounded and feeling safe. And so when you unsafe looks very different in all of us. That's another great clue that shadow is 0 to 7 stuff. Yes, that's another great clue of what's going on here. Is this my shadows? What does unsafe look like? And when do I feel that? When do I experience that? And so if someone comes into your aura and something about their aura is unsafe, alarm bells go off, whatever your alarm system is. For me, I get a little bit of a ping in my gut, but mostly like I feel like my heart racing, like I'm running, like my body's like, we gotta go. Like that's how I experience it, different for others, obviously. And then, so that's the intuitive side. And then when we're thinking about the reading side, it's really, that's where your medium comes up. So whether it's tarot, whether it's Akashic record, like whatever it is, like that's where you can get into what their shadow is. And with something like tarot, it's simply asking, right? Like, what is your shadow? What do you need to unlearn? Like some people, I get it, aren't always like aware of or comfortable with stuff like, oh, like let's talk about your shadow. But like you can ask, like, what does this person need to unlearn? Like what isn't serving them anymore? Anytime I do a reading or whatever, I always cleanse after, and I consciously say that I am releasing that which no longer serves and releasing that which is not mine to hold. So it's this idea of when we come in contact with people, when we're reading them, like inevitably something's going to exchange because you're so open and you're reading, right? But that doesn't mean that you have to hold on to it. That doesn't mean that you have to let that shadow that says, well, I have to take responsibility for everyone and everything come out to play, right? Like we can still release it. Another good way is to think about cord cutting. I love cord cutting. Like it's like a weird, like Aquarius rising. Like it's like my weird thing where I'm like, oh, like cord cutting is so cool. But so if you're reading for someone, you can ask like, where are their cords? Like what are they still attached to? What do they need? What cords do need to be cut? And see what comes up when you're in your spread. See what comes up when you're, whatever your modality is. And same if when you're working on your own shadow work. One caveat about cords: you can cut them all you want, but if you have not done the work to actually unlearn them, it will just come back stronger than before. So cord cutting, once we have gotten to a place where even just we're getting a better understanding, maybe we haven't fully unlearned it, but in order to take that next step, like we need to feel the loving detachment, like we need to cut that source. Cord cutting can be really helpful in working and giving you the space to now be able to focus on you and your shadow instead of you and their shadow and your shadow and the mix of it all. I'm going to go into the spread. Before I do, are there any other questions? Any clarifying, anything?
I love this conversation around seeing shadow in other people and like being able to claim what's yours versus not yours. I think like the more you, I guess the more you do the work, the easier it gets. But also like our shadow isn't always something to obliterate. Like I can objectively be a bitch sometimes, and it actually like really suits me and is necessary, and that's totally my shadow. And like sometimes we need that to jump in interactions with people.
Yeah, that's really important. And that kind of goes back to that thing of like, these were skills that serve a purpose at some point in time. The ideal is we learn when they need to be used versus when I'm just letting them run wild. And that only comes with getting a better understanding. And that comes with time and self-exploration. To that point, I have gotten better at deciphering what's mine and what's others just by practice, just by consciously like, why do I feel sad? Am I sad? Is this my depression? Is this someone else? Like, and you know, if no is the first two, then it's like, oh, then this is someone else. Okay, all right, that means we need to cleanse and goodbye. If it's like, I don't know, I'm just sad, it's like, okay, then that means we've also got something to process. Like it's all information, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do the spread that I was talking about. I'm gonna pull for the collective. If you have a deck, feel free to pull for yourself on your own. If you don't have a deck, don't worry, we're gonna talk through it. You can do this later, anytime. I'm not gonna tell you how to live your life. So a couple things about just good tarot hygiene. I have some Palo Santo out that I got from like a locally ethically sourced spot called Shaman's Market. They're online, they're an online store. They've got a bunch of great stuff. I encourage you to do research on where your materials are coming from, because what good is shit material? I personally always keep out, I have my labradorite palm stone, which is really great for psychic connection. Clear quartz, which is really great for just like getting to the point. I'm a meanderer and I need this. I keep a selenite wand to ground, to cleanse after. And since I'm doing a collective reading, I have some amethyst just to really help with that guidance of moving to a place of love. So cleanse your space. I cleansed before you guys were here. I have some Florida water in a spray bottle that I sprayed around the room, and then burned some sage from my garden and some Palo Santo, and just being really thoughtful and mindful in the intentions for this workshop, all that. And then just before I shuffled, I did some smoke cleansing over. Shuffle however you want. That's a question that I get often. Just like that, Florida water, 2 words. It's from before Florida became everything that it is now. I get this question a lot of like, how should I shuffle? Literally however you want. Like, I am not coordinated and I always have long nails. So like, I can't shuffle like that, but some people can, and it looks really cool, and more power to them. I'm a hand over hand shuffler. Some people put them all out and just mix them around. It's literally whatever feels good and comfortable for you. And when shuffling, thinking about whatever, I think about who it is that I'm reading for, less about the question itself. So like with this, it's like thinking about the group, thinking about the collective. And then we'll see what comes up. Ooh, okay. Oh, everyone's very chatty. Okay. All right, so as above, we have the 9 of Swords. You guys, we're going through it. Like, we're fucking going through it. So 9 of Swords is all about like, you're just like emotionally exhausted. Like it's, and I mean, duh, there's a pandemic, there's civil unrest, like we are tired. And so as above, thinking about like, what is just, how is this looking? How is this presenting? What's that surface level, like check in? So below, Knight of Cups. So like we've got work to do. No surprise there. And so if you think about if we as a collective are presenting with exhaustion, and we are presenting with just like we all need to put on death cab and cry in a dark room for a little bit. Just me? Okay. Um, like that's what we are collectively experiencing on the outside. And then on the inside, it's like, well, I can look to this and see if it'll give me what I need, or I'll look to this and see if it get, like there's a need to search for, how do I refill that cup? There's a need to search for, how do I work through this? How do I, if my cup is empty, how do I fill it back up? And what's difficult is we can't fill up the way that we have been. Like all the ways that we're used to filling up our cups aren't really available to us anymore. And so how do we find ways to feel rejuvenated, to feel recharged, to feel like we can continue on this fight in a totally different way? Drama, yes. So as above, so below. What to learn? A personal favorite, the Empress. Like, chill the fuck out, everyone. Like, the Empress, like, she's not worried. She's not stressed. She knows what's going on. And like, she's gonna make sound choices based on the information that she has. And so if we're thinking about this collective moment of, we are experiencing depletion and all the feels, also it's Cancer season, and we need to learn how to just be content with that and to sit in that and know that it doesn't make you lesser, to know that it doesn't make you incapable. It doesn't mean that it's going to be forever. Like the Empress has a confidence about her where even if she's experiencing a negative, she's fine. This too shall pass. Maybe I've never been here before, but I am confident in my ability to cope. I'm confident in my ability to be honest with myself and others, that I will get through this. I will get to the other side. And so what to unlearn? Queen of Wands, which I think is great because it's this idea of, we can't force things right now. Like, as much as we're like, I want things to go back to normal. I want to even just be able to settle into a new normal, right? Because something is always fucking coming up before we can get fully settled in right now. Like, it's not going to happen, and you need to be okay with that. And you need to trust and understand that it is not your job to force right now. It is not your job to make right now. It is your job to refill. It is your job to figure out, how do I make a path forward? How do I cope with all of this emotional turmoil that I'm feeling, this like really broody inner world? And so I think I said this in maybe my IG live, I don't remember. Wands don't come up much for me because I have so much fire in my chart that I'm constantly trying to just make things happen, regardless of if it's possible. And so if anything, my cards are always like, you need to chill the fuck out. And like, temperance always comes up. It's like, wait. And so wand energy is all about the magic of doing, the magic of making, the magic of being, right? And the consequences that come with that, good, bad, and different. But so when we've got this Queen of Wands, and what we need to unlearn is, it's this idea that like, we can force change, that we can demand change, that we can demand action, when really all we can do, and this is sort of what I was talking about before, is show the fuck up. Like, all we can do right now is show up for ourselves and the people around us and hold each other accountable. Like, that's the doing, right? The Empress just shows up. She takes what's handed to her, she makes the best of it, and she continues to show up. And so when we think about this idea of our shadow, as above, so below, learn, unlearn, our shadow is telling us, like, we've been trying to do the most and it's left us fucking tired and aimless. Like, it's left us in this space of now what, of constantly asking now what. And it's like, just sit with it for like 2 seconds. Like, there's a little bit of this like irritated energy coming in of just like, Why won't you guys sit still? I gave you a pandemic and you still won't sit still. Like, and it's, when we think about the collective, like we as a society are constantly on the go, constantly moving, constantly saying, if you're not doing something, you're not good. If you're not making something, you're not worthy. When all that is a big distraction that leaves you tired, broken, and just like a whole ass mess. Whereas if we took the time to just bask in what is and fully take in the experience of what is in front of me, what is going on, then that's when you can actually take the time to say, I like this, I don't like this, I'm gonna work on that, this just needs some maintenance. Like that's when you can make those decisions for like growth and exploration. And like when we talk about shadow work, like you can't work on your shadow if you're constantly moving away from it, if you're constantly distracting from it. Like a really great way that we as a society distract from our shadow is we're like, we just stay busy. We're a culture of busy, but busy isn't always purposeful, right? Busy work, like what does that actually mean? What is not worth anything, or it's not really like progressing us anywhere. And busy keeps us distracted, right? So now if we're all busy and distracted, then we don't notice these fucked up systems that have been running rampant. The shadow of our society that's just been running wild and allowing for racism and police brutality and inequities in the system and school to prison, like all of these big systems that we're all really having to confront right now, that we're all needing to just sit with for like 2 seconds, sit with it. And what does it really feel like to understand that you have been living, working in a society that allows for these things to happen, right? Either whether you are part of the oppressed group or oppressor group, like what does that mean? What does that mean to you as an individual? What does that mean to us as a collective? And how do we actually find a way to fill that cup back up? How do we actually find a way to move from a place of needs being met rather than this like individualistic, like, well, I got a thing, so everybody else fuck off. And so our collective shadow has just been allowed to be awful, right? And create all of these systems where like, if you're not a cis, straight, wealthy white man, then like you're fucked. and so we're being asked to look ourselves in the mirror as a society. We're being asked to look ourselves in the eye and say, do I like this? Do I like this person? Do I like this collective energy that we've created, that we're living in, that we're forcing upon ourselves and others? Am I comfortable with that? And if the answer is even the teeniest bit no, then like we've got work to do. But you're not going to figure out what that work is if you're constantly moving and constantly busy. You're just going to be distracted and depleted and tired and unable to actually do anything, which is perfect for the shadow to run wild. So sit still, take some time, and learn to be okay with not liking everything about yourself and trusting that if you just sit in that discomfort, you'll find a way through it. Thanks, guys. Questions? I wasn't in the chat. Did I miss anything?
Just that basically you should give this sermon every week. People, it's really resonating. Crying and raising the roof. Yes, yes.
My kind of party. I did a past life regression session a few months ago and like found out that I was like a pastor in a former life. I was like, that tracks. She does like to talk a lot. But yeah, you guys, thank you so much for coming today, supporting. This was super fun for me. You can find me on Instagram at Sarita Fonta, SERITA FONTA. Please feel free to DM me. We can chat. You can also email me at saritafonta@gmail.com. If you're like, I got questions, let's talk about some stuff, please do. If you want to book a reading, if you want to ask for resources, whatever, please feel free to reach out. My Instagram is mostly like burn the system down and like pictures of my dog. It's a 50-50. And a little bit of magic in there. But yes, we love it. We do. Please feel free to reach out and stay connected. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarita. I know that we're at time, so I want to be thoughtful for you. Do you have any time to take questions?
Yeah, I can take a few questions.
Okay, maybe we'll put like a 5-minute mark on it. Are there any questions that are coming up for anyone? Other than how can you join the Sarita fan club?
Oh my God, stop.
Stop it, don't stop.
This Leo can't handle it.
Anything? I want to make sure that we get to it all.
Yeah. Something wasn't making sense. If you need clarification.
I know somebody, I wrote in the chat here about when you were talking about readings and when you read for someone and seeing their shadow or feeling their shadow come up. When I read Akashic Records for people, for my students, when their shadow comes up, when they're asking something that like is coming from their shadow, their master teachers and love and spiritual team just won't answer the question. They'll say like, we're not addressed. That's not a question. Or like, that's not actually the question. And we refuse to answer it. It's really interesting that they totally drag you. Like they see your shit.
Oh yeah.
So like
they know everything and have no problem telling you. I was like, I thought you guys were supposed to be supporters. Like, feels very hurtful.
Right. Why is this a diss track? Like what's going on here?
No, thank you. Yes, that happens to me in personal readings and readings for others. And even if I'm doing the tarot, like I'll get like, this is what you're asking about, but this is really what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like, they're like, we're just going to brush over human. We're just going to move past that.
Right.
And here's the heart of it.
Yeah. They're like, dumb question. And honestly, not to drag anyone, but usually asking about abundance, it's not really about abundance.
Yeah.
There's usually something else there. So, yeah.
I mean, again, it's that idea of safety, right? Like we think abundance makes us safe. And to some capacity it does because we live in a capitalistic society. But
yes.
Also like how are you defining abundance?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I bet there's a disconnect somewhere because we're humans.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's always really fun. All right. My MTLs are super spacey. Yes, they are. They generally are. Cool, y'all. Well, thanks for joining us. And you know how to find Sarita. Follow her on Instagram. Give her some love on there. And I'll be sending this replay out to all of you. And thanks for joining class. This has been the beginning of our experiment with sliding scale payments, which are our first step in divesting from wellness capitalism. So it's been really interesting to see what happens and what's come up. And I'm just so impressed by the fact that every single class, our median price has landed at $19, which means that the sliding scale is working if we have 3 different price points and we're meeting our community at all of them. So that's amazing. So thank you. If you gave a little bit more this time, you afforded someone else an opportunity to come here and learn and heal. And if you didn't, you maybe were on the $9 track. Thank you for showing up and being here and allowing yourself to be held by others. That's a huge part of healing too. And I'm just really grateful that you are all in this experiment with us. And I'm really grateful for Sarita just taking the time to teach us. So thank you. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your Saturday. I'll send you the replay to this soon. And Sarita, any final thoughts before we book out of here?
Shadow work isn't easy, so be gentle and make space for like real self-care. I mean, you can take a bath, sure, but like make sure that like you are making space to, again, that idea of replenishing. Don't beat yourself up. That's not what this is for.
Yeah, and don't rush it. It's not a sprint. It
Yes,
takes the time that it takes.
I have yet to finish this book, and I've had it for almost a year, and it's yay big. Like there's work.
That I pretty much highlighted that entire book because it is
See,
all
I
it's
stopped highlighting because it's like you've
right.
just colored the page.
It's like everything's important, like all of it, every single line. So
Yes.
it is chalk. Like if you're thinking about diving into a book on shadow work, I so strongly recommend that one. It's like the bare bones, what you need to know, really succinct.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Sweet. All right, y'all. Well,
Right.
thank you so much, Sarita. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
beautiful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all soon. See you on the internet. And happy Pride, National Pride Day, International.
Yeah, happy National Pride.
Um, oh, what's the
Gold
book?
mining the shadow.
We
That's
got you, Erica. Pixie Lighthorse.
Mm-hmm.
Great
Good
book.
old Pixie.
She's a dream. All right, y'all. See you later. Have
All
a
right.
good Saturday.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.